October rain drummed on the windows of the Fountain Social Services building, creating a monotonous melody that usually calmed Jennifer Cole. The 42-year-old woman sat at her worn wooden desk, reviewing the documents of her latest client, when there was a knock at the door. "Come in," she said without looking up from her papers. The door opened, and a tall, slender woman in a simple gray sweater and jeans entered. Her long auburn hair was neatly styled, and her makeup was applied with particular care. She fidgeted nervously with the strap of her purse and smiled uncertainly. "Hello, my name is Michelle Anderson. I called yesterday about help with housing and employment," she said in a quiet, slightly hoarse voice. Jennifer looked up and smiled warmly. In her 12 years as a social worker, she had learned to read people at a glance, and in this woman, she saw a familiar mixture of hope and despair. "Of course, please sit down," Jennifer said, pointing to a chair across from her. "Would you like some coffee? It's not very good, but it's hot." "No, thank you," Michelle said cautiously, sitting down with her back straight, as if preparing for an interrogation. Jennifer opened a new folder and picked up a pen. "Tell me about your situation, Michelle. What brought you to Fountain?" Michelle hesitated, looking out the window at the rainy street. "I needed to start a new life, somewhere where no one knew me. I had problems where I used to live." "What kind of problems?" Jennifer spoke softly, without pressure. She knew that people like this couldn't be rushed. "I'm a transgender woman," Michelle said quietly but firmly. "The transition process was painful. Not everyone in my old town understood. I was threatened, I lost my job. I decided it was better to leave and start over." Jennifer nodded understandingly. In a small town like Fountain, stories like this were not uncommon. People came here to escape their past, debt, domestic violence, discrimination. "I understand. It takes a lot of courage," she said sincerely. "Where are you living now?" "In a motel on the outskirts of town, Pine Grove, but I only have enough money for another week, 2 at most." "What about your education, work experience?" Michelle hesitated again. "I finished high school. I've worked in different places. Waitress, salesperson, warehouse assistant. I'm willing to do anything, honestly." Jennifer took notes, occasionally looking up at her interviewee. Something about Michelle's manner of speaking seemed familiar, but she couldn't quite place it. "Do you have any documents confirming your name change?" "Yes, I have everything." Michelle took a neat folder of documents out of her purse. "Name change certificate, new driver's license, birth certificate." Jennifer carefully examined the papers. Everything looked in order. Michelle Anderson, 35 years old, name change registered 2 years ago in California. "Okay, let's see what we can do to help." Jennifer opened her computer. "We have temporary housing available, a small apartment on Maple Street. The previous tenant moved out last week. It's 1 bedroom, very basic furniture, but it has everything you need." Michelle's eyes lit up. "That would be wonderful. How much would it cost?" "The first 3 months are free, then a nominal fee of $200 per month. But there is one condition. You must actively look for work and report back on your search." "Of course, I agree to any conditions." Jennifer smiled. "Great. Now about the job. There are a few places in town that don't have any special requirements. Bill's Grocery needs a salesperson, and the Clean Laundromat is looking for an assistant. I'm ready to go there right now." "Don't rush. Let's get you settled in first, and then we'll look for a job tomorrow. By the way, do you have a cell phone?" Michelle showed her an old smartphone. "Yes, but it's a California number." "That's okay. We'll get you a local number later. In the meantime, let's go take a look at the apartment." Half an hour later, they were standing in front of a small 2-story house on Maple Street. The rain had almost stopped, but the air was still damp and cool. The apartment was on the first floor with a separate entrance and a tiny garden. "It's beautiful," Michelle said, looking around the modest furnishings. The furniture was simple, but everything was clean and tidy. "I don't know how to thank you." "Just find a job and live peacefully." Jennifer handed her the keys. "You have my number. Call me if you need anything." When Jennifer left, Michelle locked the door and leaned against it. Her heart was still pounding from the nervous tension. So far, everything had gone according to plan, but she knew that the hardest part was yet to come. In a small town, secrets don't stay secret for long, and she had too many of them. That evening, Jennifer sat in her kitchen helping her 16-year-old daughter Sarah with her history homework. Sarah was a smart girl, but lately she had become withdrawn and irritable. Typical teenage behavior, Jennifer thought. "Mom, who was that woman who called today?" Sarah asked, without looking up from her textbook. "What woman?" "I heard you talking on the phone with someone about an apartment on Maple Street. A new client?" Jennifer smiled. Despite her age, Sarah was surprisingly observant. "Yes, her name is Michelle. She moved here from California and is looking for a job." "Why did she move?" "Sarah, you know I can't discuss client matters," Jennifer reminded her gently. "I'm just curious. People don't often move to our town, they usually leave." It was true. Fountain was a typical American town with an aging population where young people left for the big cities in search of a better life. New residents were a rare sight. "Sometimes people need to start over," Jennifer said. "We should help each other." Sarah nodded, but something in her eyes said the conversation wasn't over. The next day, Jennifer met Michelle at Bill's grocery store. Old Bill Connor was one of the few employers in town who didn't ask questions if you were willing to work hard. "So you're from California?" Bill asked, looking at Michelle over his glasses. "That's a long way to come." "Yes, sir. I wanted to try living in a small town," Michelle replied. "Do you have any retail experience?" "I worked as a sales clerk in a grocery store for 2 years." Bill nodded. "Good. We pay $10 an hour, Monday through Saturday, from 8 in the morning to 6 in the evening. Sundays are off. Is that okay?" "Yes, of course." "Then you start tomorrow. Jennifer vouched for you and I trust her." As she left the store, Michelle felt relieved. The first stage of her plan had been successful. Now the main thing was not to attract attention and live quietly. "Congratulations," said Jennifer. "Bill is a nice man, easy to work with." "Thank you for everything. I'm very grateful." "You're welcome. By the way, there's a meeting for new residents at the community center tomorrow evening. It's an informal gathering where you can meet people and make friends. Would you like to go?" Michelle hesitated. On the one hand, she needed to integrate into the community so as not to appear suspicious. On the other hand, the more people who knew her, the greater the risk. "Yes, why not?" she said finally. "Great. See you there at 7. That evening, Michelle stood in front of the mirror for a long time, deciding what to wear. She chose a simple black dress and a cardigan. Nothing provocative, but feminine. She applied her makeup carefully, paying special attention to her eyes and lips. The Fountain Community Center was a small building in the center of town, built back in the 60s. When Michelle entered, there were already about 20 people there, mostly middle-aged, a few older couples, and a young woman with a child. "Michelle, you're here!" Jennifer approached her with a smile. "Come on, let me introduce you to everyone." The next hour was spent introducing herself and making small talk. Michelle tried to answer questions briefly but friendly. She talked about California, her desire to live in a quiet place, and her job at the store. "Do you have a family?" asked an elderly woman named Doris. "No, I'm alone," Michelle replied. "That's a shame. Do you plan on having any?" "I'm not thinking about that right now." In the corner of the room, she noticed a girl who was watching her intently. Tall, with red hair. She looked familiar. "That's Sarah, my daughter," Jennifer explained, noticing her gaze. "Sarah, come and meet Michelle." Sarah approached but kept her distance. "Hi," she said. "Hi, Sarah. My mom has told me a lot about you." "Really? What did she say?" "That you're a smart girl and a good student." Sarah nodded but continued to study Michelle. "Are you really from California?" "Yes, from San Jose." "Interesting. Why did you decide to move to Fountain?" Jennifer frowned slightly. "Sarah, don't interrogate her." "It's okay," Michelle said. "I was looking for a quiet place to start a new life. Fountain seemed like the right place." "I see," Sarah nodded, but there was something else in her eyes. By the end of the evening, Michelle felt exhausted. Constantly watching every word, every intonation was exhausting. But so far, everything was going well. People were friendly, and no one asked any suspicious questions. "How was it?" Jennifer asked as they left the center. "Everyone was very nice. Thanks for inviting me." "You're welcome. By the way, if you need any help with anything else." Don't hesitate to call. I will. On the way home, Michelle thought about how lucky she was to have met someone like Jennifer. Kind, responsive, willing to help. It was a pity that sooner or later she might become a problem. It had been 2 weeks since Michelle started working at Bill's store. Every morning she woke up at 6:30, carefully applied her makeup and styled her hair. This daily routine had become a ritual for her, a way to prepare for another day of living a life that wasn't hers. Things were going well at the store. Bill was pleased with her work. She arrived on time, was polite to customers, and quickly learned all her duties. Michelle liked that the job didn't require much interaction. She could scan items, take payments, and exchange pleasantries without revealing anything personal. But sometimes customers asked questions that made her nervous. "Michelle, dear, where did you get such strong hands?" Mrs. Parker, an elderly retired teacher, asked one day. "Did you play sports when you were younger?" "A little," Michelle replied, quickly hiding her hands under the counter. She had forgotten to put on her gloves, and the calluses from her prison labor were clearly visible. "Your voice sounds hoarse today. Did you catch a cold?" "Yes, my throat is a little scratchy." Mrs. Parker nodded and left, but Michelle noticed her glance back as she left. She had to be more careful. That evening, Michelle sat in her apartment watching YouTube videos on how to speak with a feminine voice. She had been practicing for several months, but sometimes, especially when she was tired, she forgot. The phone rang, interrupting her practice. "Hi, Michelle. It's Jennifer. How are you?" "I'm fine, thanks." "Great. Listen, I wanted to ask if you'd like to have dinner with us tomorrow. Nothing fancy, just at home, but I think it would be good for you to get out." Michelle hesitated. On the one hand, refusing might seem suspicious. On the other hand, the closer she got to Jennifer, the greater the risk of being exposed. "That's very kind of you. I'd love to." "Great. Come over at 7 tomorrow. I'll send you the address in a message." After the conversation, Michelle stared out the window for a long time. Rain was falling outside, and the drops ran down the glass like tears. She thought about how far she had gone in her game. 2 years ago, sitting in a cell at San Quentin, she could never have imagined that she would be living this life. 2 years ago, San Quentin Correctional Facility, California. Marcus Lewis sat in the office of prison psychiatrist Dr. Helen White. He was 33 years old and serving time for a series of burglaries. He had a year and a half left to serve, but he knew he couldn't take it anymore. "Marcus, you asked for a meeting," said Dr. White, a woman in her 50s with gray hair and kind eyes behind glasses. "What's bothering you?" "Doctor, I need to tell you something. It's hard." "I'm listening." Marcus took a deep breath. He had rehearsed this conversation for weeks. "I think I'm transgender. I've always felt like a woman, but I've only just started to understand it." Dr. White leaned forward. "Tell me more. When did you first feel this way?" "Ever since I was a child. I wanted to play with girls, wear their clothes, but my father was against it. He beat me for it." It was true. Marcus's father had been a violent man, and his childhood had been spent in constant fear. But the motives he now attributed to his childhood desires were fabricated. "I see. And now, how do you feel?" "Every day I wake up in a foreign body. It's agonizing. I can't pretend anymore." Dr. White took notes. "This is a serious issue, Marcus. Gender dysphoria is a condition that requires careful study. We will conduct a series of sessions to better understand your situation." "Doctor, is it true that transgender prisoners are transferred to women's prisons?" "In some cases, yes. But this decision is made on an individual basis after careful consideration." Marcus nodded. Everything was going according to plan. Over the next few months, he met regularly with Dr. White. He talked about his experiences, how difficult it was for him to live in a male body, and his plans for the future. He studied all the available material on transgender people and memorized typical phrases and stories. Dr. White was a professional, but she was also a person with a big heart. She believed that everyone deserved understanding and support. Gradually, she began to lean toward the idea that Marcus was indeed experiencing gender dysphoria. "Marcus, I think it's time to talk to the administration about a possible transfer," she said after one of the sessions. Really? Do you think I'm ready? I believe you need the appropriate conditions. A women's prison would be a more suitable place for you. 3 months later, Marcus was transferred to a women's correctional facility in Chino. Officially, he became Michelle Anderson. The conditions there were much better. More spacious cells, better food, less violence. He studied feminine manners, learned to paint his nails and style his hair. The other inmates treated him with understanding, and many even offered advice. But most importantly, he felt safe. No one threatened him. No one tried to hurt him. This was exactly what he had been striving for. Present day, Fountain. Michelle shook her head, chasing away the memories. It was time to get ready to go to Jennifer's. She chose a simple blouse and skirt, not too bright, but feminine. She applied her makeup carefully, enough to look well-groomed, but not provocative. Jennifer's house was in the old part of town, on a quiet street with large trees. It was a 2-story house with white walls and blue shutters, surrounded by a small garden. When Michelle approached the door, she heard voices and laughter inside. "Michelle, come in!" Jennifer opened the door with a smile. "I'm glad you could make it." Inside, the house was cozy and lived in. Family photos were everywhere. Children's drawings hung on the refrigerator, and the fireplace was lit in the living room. "Sarah, say hello to our guest," Jennifer said. Sarah got up from the couch where she was doing her homework. Today she was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, her hair tied back in a ponytail. She looked very young, but there was an adult attentiveness in her eyes. "Hi, Michelle," she said. "Hi, Sarah. How's school?" "Fine." Sarah continued to study her intently. "Have you really never been to Fountain before?" "Sarah!" Jennifer scolded her. "Sorry, she's just curious." "It's okay," Michelle said. "No, Sarah, this is my first time here. What makes you think that?" "You just looked familiar. Maybe I saw you on the internet or somewhere." Michelle felt her stomach tighten. "I don't think so. I'm not very active on social media." "Interesting." Sarah shrugged, but continued to stare at her intently. The conversation over dinner was light and easy. Jennifer talked about her work, the problems in the city, and her plans for the weekend. Michelle answered questions, trying not to go into too much detail. "Do you have any hobbies?" Jennifer asked. "I read a lot. I love detective stories." "Really? Which authors do you like?" "Agatha Christie, John Grisham." Michelle named a few authors she remembered from the prison library. "Oh, I love Agatha Christie too. What do you think of her latest book?" "Which one?" Michelle asked cautiously. "The one that came out last year. What was it called?" "Sarah, remember?" "Mom, Agatha Christie died in the 70s, Sarah said. "She can't have any new books." Jennifer laughed. "Oh, you're right. I got her mixed up with someone else. Sorry." Michelle relaxed, but she noticed that Sarah was looking at her with interest again. "Michelle, have you ever been married?" Jennifer asked. "No. My relationships have been complicated. Not all men are ready for someone like me." "I understand. That must be difficult." "Yes. But I hope things will be different here." After dinner, Sarah went to finish her homework, and Michelle and Jennifer sat in the living room drinking tea. "Sarah is a very smart girl," Michelle said. "Yes, sometimes too much. She's a real detective, always trying to figure everything out." "What about her father?" "We divorced when she was 8. He lives in Denver, and we don't see each other very often." "It must be difficult raising a child on your own." "It can be, but we manage," Michelle nodded. "You're a very good mother, it shows." "Thank you. Have you ever thought about having children?" "I used to, but now I don't know. Maybe it's too early." "Of course. You have your whole life ahead of you." As Michelle was about to leave, Sarah came down the stairs. "Michelle, can I ask you something?" "Sarah, it's late," Jennifer began, but Michelle stopped her. "What do you want to ask?" "You have a scar on your neck. How did you get it?" Michelle instinctively covered the spot where an old scar from a prison fight was hidden under the collar of her blouse. "It was an accident. It happened a long time ago." "I see," Sarah nodded. "I was just curious." On the way home, Michelle thought about the evening. Jennifer was a wonderful woman, kind, responsive, helpful. But her daughter Sarah was too observant. She noticed things she shouldn't have noticed and asked questions she shouldn't have asked. At home, Michelle stood in front of the mirror for a long time, studying her reflection. She saw what others saw, a tall, slender woman with long hair and neat makeup. But sometimes, especially in certain lighting, something else shone through that mask. She picked up the phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. "Hello? Eddie, it's me. Michelle, my goodness, I thought you were deceased. Where are you?" "It's best not to know. Listen, I need some information. Are there any issues with the documents?" "No, everything is in order. Your identity is secure. I did a good job." "What about the internet? If someone searches for Michelle Anderson?" "They'll find what they need. A social media page, a few photos, work history, everything looks natural." "Good, thanks. Hey, wait. Are you okay? Did something happen?" "No, everything's fine, just checking." "Take care, Michelle. And remember, if anything goes wrong, I don't know you." "Got it." Michelle hung up and sat down on her bed. Eddie Torres was the best document forger on the West Coast. He had created a new identity for her while he was in prison through mutual acquaintances. But he was right. If something went wrong, she would be on her own. The wind howled outside, and Michelle thought about how long the winter would be. She had to hold out until spring without attracting attention, but with each passing day, it became more difficult. Too many questions, too many watchful eyes, especially the eyes of Sarah Cole. December arrived in Fountain with the first snow and frosty air that stung the cheeks. Michelle had been living in the town for 2 months, and her life had settled into a quiet routine. Work at the store, occasional meetings with Jennifer, quiet evenings at home. Everything was going exactly as she had planned. But this morning, something had changed. Detective Tom Harris parked his beat-up Ford near Bill's store and slowly made his way to the entrance. The 48-year-old man with graying hair and tired eyes looked like someone who had seen too much in his life. In a small town like Fountain, serious crimes were rare, but for the past few weeks, strange little things had been bothering him. When he entered the store, he saw the new employee he had been told about behind the counter. She was a tall, slender woman with neatly styled hair and carefully applied makeup. She was helping an elderly woman with her shopping, and her voice sounded soft and polite. "Good morning," he said as he approached the cash register. "Good morning, officer," Michelle replied, instantly tensing up. "How can I help you?" "Detective Harris," he said, showing his badge. "I need to talk to some new residents. Routine procedure, nothing serious." "Sure." Michelle tried to stay calm, but her heart was pounding. "What do you want to know?" "Are you Michelle Anderson?" "Yes." "Where are you from?" "California, San Jose." Harris took out a notebook and began to write. "Reason for moving?" "I wanted to start a new life. It was difficult in the big city." "I understand. Did you work anywhere before that?" "In different places. Waitress, salesperson." "Can you name any specific places?" Michelle hesitated. "The Golden Dragon restaurant in San Jose, Fresh Market Supermarket. But that was a few years ago." Harris nodded, continuing to write. "Are your documents in order?" "Yes, I have everything." "Good. If I need to contact you, can I get your phone number?" Michelle gave him her number, and the detective wrote it down. "Thanks for your cooperation. Have a good day." When Harris left, Michelle felt her hands shaking. She knew very well that this wasn't just a routine check. Something had alerted him. But what? That evening, Harris sat in his office at the police station, reviewing his records. Fountain was a quiet town where everyone knew each other, and the arrival of a new resident always aroused interest. He didn't usually bother checking out newcomers, but this time there was something special about this one. The day before yesterday, Mrs. Parker, an elderly retired teacher, approached him. She said that the new saleswoman at the store seemed strange to her. "Tom, I don't want to accuse anyone, but there's something wrong with her," Mrs. Parker said. "Her hands are like a man's, strong with calluses, and her voice changes. Sometimes it sounds completely different." Harris was skeptical. Mrs. Parker was a notorious gossip who saw conspiracy everywhere. But then another woman came forward with similar observations, and this morning, when he met Michelle in person, he sensed something elusive. He turned on his computer and started searching. Michelle Anderson, 35, San Jose, California. There wasn't much information. A Facebook page with a few photos, a record of a name change 2 years ago, and details of previous jobs. It all looked plausible but too neat, as if someone had tried very hard to create the right picture. Harris picked up the phone and dialed his colleague's number in San Jose. "Bill, this is Tom Harris from Fountain. I need some help checking out someone." At that moment, Sarah Cole was sitting in her room staring at her laptop screen. She couldn't shake the feeling that she knew Michelle from somewhere. The feeling had been with her since they first met, and she decided to investigate on her own. Sarah was a smart girl who planned to study journalism. She knew how to research and verify facts. For the past few weeks, she had been secretly researching everything she could find about Michelle Anderson. Her Facebook profile looked normal, but something about it was disturbing. The photos were all from the last 2 years. No high school friends, no old family pictures. It was as if Michelle's life had started from scratch 2 years ago. Sarah tried searching for images by uploading Michelle's photos. The results were strange. No matches, no other profiles with the same photos. This was unusual for someone who had supposedly lived in California for a long time. Then she tried a different approach. Sarah remembered that Michelle had mentioned working at the Golden Dragon restaurant. She found the restaurant's website and called them. "Hello, this is Sarah from the employment agency. I need to check Michelle Anderson's employment history. Did she work for you as a waitress?" "One moment, let me check. No, we never had an employee by that name. Maybe it was a few years ago." "I've been here for 8 years and I keep all the personnel records. No Michelle Anderson ever worked here." Sarah hung up the phone, her heart racing. Michelle had lied about her place of employment. But why? She tried Fresh Market. Same result. No one had ever heard of Michelle Anderson. Sarah leaned back in her chair, thinking about the information she had received. Either Michelle had mixed up the names, or she had deliberately given false information. But why would an ordinary person lie about such a simple thing? The door slammed downstairs. Her mother was home from work. "Sarah, I'm home!" Jennifer called out. "Coming," Sarah replied, but didn't move. She wondered whether she should tell her mother about her discoveries. Jennifer was kind and trusting, always trying to see the good in people. What if Michelle was really hiding something dangerous? Meanwhile, Michelle was at home, pacing back and forth in her small living room. The detective's visit had thrown her off balance. She knew this could be the beginning of the end. If he started digging deeper, if he contacted California. She picked up the phone and dialed Eddie's number again. "Michelle? You again?" "Eddie, I'm in trouble. The local police have started an investigation." "What kind of investigation?" "A detective came by and asked about my work in California. What if he contacts the places I mentioned?" "Calm down. I told you everything's been taken care of. If anyone calls, they'll say the records were lost in a fire. It happened last year. It's all documented. What if he finds something else? Something." "Michelle, you're being paranoid. Your identity is flawless. Just act normal and don't draw attention to yourself." "Okay, thanks. And remember, if anything goes wrong, we don't know each other." Michelle hung up the phone, but her anxiety remained. She walked over to the mirror and studied her reflection closely. Maybe she really had done something wrong. Maybe her behavior was giving her away. The next day, the store was unusually quiet. Michelle was standing behind the counter, sorting through merchandise and thinking about her problems, when Jennifer walked in. "Hi, Michelle, how's it going?" "Hi, Jennifer, everything's fine." "Listen, I wanted to ask you, Sarah said that Detective Harris came to see you yesterday. Is everything okay?" "Yes, just a routine check. He said he was interviewing all the new residents." "I see. I was worried. Tom doesn't usually get involved in things like that unless there's a reason." "Like what?" "Well, if someone's complaining, or if there's suspicion." Jennifer stopped, realizing she'd said too much. "But that's not the case with you, of course." "Of course not," Michelle agreed. But inside, she felt a knot in her stomach. Someone had complained about her. Someone suspected something. "By the way, do you want to join us this weekend? Sarah and I are going to the mall in the next town. Maybe we'll buy something for New Year's." "That's very nice, but I don't want to impose." You're not imposing. On the contrary, it'll be more fun with you. Michelle agreed, even though her inner voice told her it was a bad idea. The more time she spent with Jennifer and Sarah, the greater the risk of saying something wrong. On Saturday, they drove to a mall in a neighboring town. Sarah was unusually quiet, which did not go unnoticed by Jennifer. "Sarah, what's wrong? You usually love shopping." "Everything's fine, Mom. I'm just thinking about school." But in reality, Sarah was watching Michelle closely. She noticed how she was choosing clothes, too carefully, as if she wasn't sure of her preferences. How strange she looked in the women's department, as if she had never been there before. In the cafe, when they stopped for a snack, Sarah decided to conduct a little test. "Michelle, do you remember how girls were teased at school for their appearance?" "What?" Michelle choked on her coffee. "You know, how girls at school can be cruel, especially during adolescence. You went to a regular school, right?" "Yes, of course. There were different things." "Were you teased?" "Sarah, why are you asking these questions?" Jennifer interrupted. "I'm just curious. There's a girl in my class who's, well, different, and some of the other girls tease her." "That's not nice," Michelle said. "Kids can be cruel. Yeah, it's interesting how people change. You, for example, you've changed so much over the last few years." "What do you mean?" "Well, in the old photos on your Facebook, you look completely different. Your hair, your makeup, even your face somehow." "Sarah!" Jennifer said sternly. "Enough questioning!" "It's okay," Michelle said quickly. "Yes, I've changed a lot. It was a difficult time in my life." "What time?" "Sarah, let's go," Jennifer said, getting up from the table. "Sorry, Michelle, she's too nosy." On the way home, an awkward silence reigned in the car. Michelle stared out the window. Jennifer drove, and Sarah sat in the back seat, mulling over the information she had received. When she got home, Sarah immediately went up to her room and sat down at her computer. She was sure Michelle was hiding something. But what? And why? She began a new search, this time more systematic. She searched databases, news reports, and any mention of the name Michelle Anderson in connection with California. And then she found what she was looking for. In the archives of the local San Jose newspaper, there was a brief mention of a name change. Marcus Lewis had officially changed his name to Michelle Anderson 2 years ago. The reason was a change in gender identity. Sarah stared at the screen. So Michelle really was a man once. But why was she so nervous about simple questions? Why did she lie about her places of employment? She continued her search and found a mention of Marcus Lewis in police reports. Arrested for burglary 5 years ago, sentenced to 3 years in prison. Sarah's heart began to race. Michelle had been in prison. She had hidden her criminal past. But did that mean she was dangerous? Her mother's voice called from downstairs. "Sarah, dinner's ready!" Sarah closed her laptop and slowly went downstairs. At the table, Jennifer was talking about her plans for the following week, but Sarah wasn't listening. She was thinking about what to do with the information she had received. Tell her mother? But she might not believe her or decide that everyone deserves a second chance. Go to the police? But what if she was wrong? Sarah looked at her mother, who was still chatting about work, and made a decision. She would watch Michelle and gather more evidence. Then she would decide what to do next. January snow covered Fountain with a thick white blanket, turning the small town into a frozen picture. Michelle stood at the window of her apartment, watching the few passers-by make their way along the snow-covered sidewalks. She hadn't left the house for 3 days. Her store had given her time off because of a cold she didn't actually have. She was just afraid. Over the past week, everything had gone wrong. Detective Harris had come to the store twice with questions that were becoming more and more specific. Bill, the store owner, had started looking at her strangely. And Sarah had stopped even pretending to be friendly. The phone rang, interrupting her dark thoughts. "Michelle, it's Jennifer. How are you feeling?" "Better, thanks. My fever's gone down." "Good. Listen, I need to talk to you. It's important. Can you come over tonight?" Michelle's heart skipped a beat. "What's wrong?" "Better in person. How about 8?" "Okay, I'll be there." After the call, Michelle sat on her bed for a long time, trying to calm down. What could have happened? What did Jennifer know? Maybe it was something harmless, problems with rent or work documents. But her inner voice told her that it was much more serious. At that moment, Jennifer was sitting in her office, rereading the printout Sarah had brought her the night before. The article from the San Jose newspaper archive was short but informative. Marcus Lewis, convicted of a series of burglaries, has filed a request to change his name due to gender dysphoria. "Mom, you don't believe me?" Sarah asked as Jennifer reread the text for the third time. "It's not about whether I believe you or not. It's about the fact that you invaded someone's privacy. She lied to us about her job, her past, maybe everything. People have a right to privacy, Sarah, especially when it comes to something as personal as gender reassignment. What about a criminal past? Does she have a right to hide that too?" Jennifer sighed. She understood her daughter's anger, but at the same time she felt betrayed. Michelle had lied, and about important things. But did that mean she was dangerous? "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked. "Talk to her. Find out the truth. What if she tries to, what, hurt me? Sarah, this is our living room, not a dark alley." But now, sitting alone, Jennifer wasn't so sure. A person who could lie so skillfully, create a false identity, hide a prison past. What else was he capable of? She picked up the phone and dialed Detective Harris's number. "Tom, this is Jennifer Cole. I need to discuss something with you. It's about Michelle Anderson." "Interesting. I was just about to call you about the same thing." "Really?" "Yes. I contacted my colleagues in California. What she told them about her past is not true. Can we meet tomorrow morning?" "Of course. But first I want to talk to her myself." "Jennifer, be careful. We don't know who we're dealing with yet." "I'll be careful." But caution was the last thing on Jennifer's mind when she opened the door at 8 o'clock that evening. Michelle was standing on the doorstep in a dark coat, her face pale and her eyes darting nervously around. "Come in," Jennifer said. "Sarah's at a friend's house, so we can talk in private." Michelle took off her coat and went into the living room. She noticed that Jennifer was unusually tense, that her usual warmth had disappeared. "Sit down," Jennifer said, pointing to the sofa. "Would you like some coffee?" "No, thank you. What did you want to discuss?" Jennifer sat down opposite her, placing her hands on her knees. "Michelle, I need to ask you a few questions, and I hope you'll be honest with me." "Of course." "Did you really work at the Golden Dragon restaurant in San Jose?" Michelle froze. "What?" "It's a simple question. Yes or no?" "Why are you asking?" "Because Sarah checked. She called there. They don't remember you." Michelle felt everything inside her break. "Sarah called?" "Yes, and not just there. Michelle, who are you really?" The silence dragged on. Michelle knew the game was over. She could try to lie again, come up with an explanation, but Jennifer's gaze told her she already knew the truth. "How much do you know?" Michelle asked quietly. "I know your real name is Marcus Lewis. I know you were in prison. I know you changed your name 2 years ago." Michelle closed her eyes. "Jennifer, I can explain everything." "Then explain." "Yes, I was a man. Yes, I was in prison, but I've changed. I'm a different person now." "You are? Or are you pretending?" "What do you mean?" "Sarah suspects that you're pretending to be transgender, that it was a ploy to get better conditions in prison." Michelle stood up abruptly. "That's not true." "Is it? Because if you look closely, a lot of things seem suspicious. You appeared out of nowhere with new documents and a false work history. I wanted to start a new life. As a man or as a woman?" The question hung in the air. Michelle realized that any answer would be wrong. "Jennifer, You know what angers me the most?" Jennifer stood up and walked over to the window. "It's not that you lied about your job or even about prison. What angers me is that you took advantage of my kindness. I helped you because I thought you were in trouble, but you were just playing a role. It wasn't a game. My life was ruined." "By whose actions? You stole? You got caught? You went to prison? Where's the injustice in that?" Michelle felt rage boiling up inside her. All those months of pretending, all the humiliation, the need to play a role, and all for nothing. This smug woman was looking down on her. judging her, without understanding what she had been through. "You don't understand," she said through clenched teeth. "Then explain it to me." "You think you know what it's like to be in prison? To fear for your life every day? To sleep with one eye open? I did what I had to do to survive. At the expense of other people. At the expense of the women prisoners you cheated. At the expense of me, my daughter. I didn't hurt anyone." "Not yet, you mean?" Jennifer turned to her, and there was no anger in her eyes, only disappointment. "You know what I'm going to do, Michelle? Or whatever your real name is? Tomorrow morning, I'm going to Detective Harris. I'm going to tell him everything I know. He can decide what to do about it. Jennifer, please. Right now, I want you to get out of my house. Listen to me." "No." Jennifer headed for the door. "This conversation is over." But Michelle didn't move. She stood in the middle of the living room shaking. Not from the cold, but from the realization that it was over. Tomorrow, Jennifer would go to the police. A real investigation would begin. The whole truth would come out. She would be sent back to a men's prison where she would not survive. "Jennifer," she called. "What?" "I can't let you do this." Something in her voice made Jennifer turn around. What she saw in Michelle's eyes made her step back. "What did you say?" "I said I can't let you go to the police." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm telling the truth." Jennifer backed toward the door, but Michelle quickly got between her and the exit. "Michelle, get away! Let me go!" "No! Let me go!" Jennifer tried to push her away, but Michelle grabbed her wrists. Years of prison had done their work. She was stronger than she looked. "Let go!" Jennifer screamed, trying to break free. They struggled, bumping into furniture. Jennifer tried to reach the phone, but Michelle wouldn't let her get close. At one point, Jennifer managed to free one hand and hit Michelle in the face. "Bitch!" Michelle yelled, and Marcus's real voice broke through, rough and masculine. Jennifer froze in shock for a moment, and that was enough. Michelle pushed her so hard that Jennifer fell, hitting her head on the edge of the coffee table. The crack was quiet but ominous. Jennifer lay on the floor motionless. A dark pool slowly spread beneath her head. Michelle stood over her, breathing heavily. "Jennifer?" There was no answer. "Jennifer, get up!" But Jennifer would never get up again. Michelle knelt down next to the body, unable to believe what had happened. She didn't want this to happen. She just wanted to make Jennifer shut up, but now everything had changed. She looked at the clock. 8:47. Sarah was supposed to be back at 10. Time was running out. Michelle stood up and looked around. She had to think fast. She had to cover her tracks. First, she wiped her fingerprints off any furniture she might have touched. Then she checked her clothes. There were a few drops of blood on her blouse. They had to be washed out. She rearranged the furniture to make it look like an accidental fall. She removed anything that might indicate a struggle. At 9:30, she slipped out the back door, making sure no one was watching. She made her way through the snow-covered alley to her apartment, constantly looking over her shoulder. At home, she burned her clothes in the fireplace and took a long, hot shower. Then she lay down in bed and waited with her eyes open. At 10:15, a scream pierced the silence of the night. Sarah found her mother's body. Half an hour later, the neighborhood was filled with flashing ambulance and police lights. Detective Harris stood in the Cowles' living room, studying the scene. "Looks like an accident," said one of the officers. "Slipped, fell, hit her head." "Possibly," Harris muttered, but something bothered him. Outside the window, Michelle watched what was happening from behind the curtain. Sarah sat in the ambulance, wrapped in a blanket, crying. Michelle felt a pang of guilt, but quickly suppressed it. She had no choice. Jennifer had brought this on herself. Now, the important thing was to act normal, to be shocked like everyone else, to offer condolences, to suspect nothing. Monday morning brought to Fountain that special silence that comes after a tragedy. Snow continued to fall, as if nature was trying to cover the town in grief. Detective Tom Harris sat in his office, looking through photos from the scene, unable to shake the feeling that something was wrong. Officially, Jennifer Cole's death had been ruled an accident. Everything seemed logical. She had slipped, fallen, and hit her head on the corner of a coffee table. The medical examiner confirmed that the head injury was the cause of death, and the nature of the injuries was consistent with a fall. But Harris had been a police officer for 25 years, and his intuition rarely failed him. There was a knock at the door. "Come in." Sarah Cole entered, accompanied by her Aunt Margaret, who had come from a neighboring state. The girl looked haggard and pale, but her eyes burned with determination. "Detective Harris, I need to talk to you," Sarah said. "Of course. Have a seat." Margaret put her hand on her niece's shoulder. "Sarah, maybe you shouldn't." "No, Auntie. It's important." Sarah looked at the detective. "I don't believe my mom just fell." Harris leaned forward. "Tell me more." "Mom knew something about Michelle Anderson. She was going to talk to her that night and then come to your house in the morning." "What exactly did she want to talk about?" Sarah took a deep breath. "Michelle isn't who she says she is. Her real name is Marcus Lewis, and she's been in prison." Harris felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. "How do you know that?" "I did some investigating of my own. Michelle lied about her job in California, and she had no history until 2 years ago. I found records of a name change and a criminal record." "And you told your mom about this?" "Yes." She didn't want to believe it at first, but then she agreed to talk to Michelle and find out the truth. Harris leaned back in his chair. Now everything was falling into place. "Sarah, why didn't you tell me about this right away?" "I was in shock, and then I thought you wouldn't believe me. Everyone thinks it was an accident." "I believe you." Harris stood up and took his jacket. "Margaret, take Sarah home, and don't say a word about this conversation to anyone." An hour later, Harris was standing at Michelle's door. He didn't knock for a long time, thinking about his strategy. If Sarah was right, he was facing not just a man with a criminal past, but a possible murderer. Finally, he knocked. "Just a minute," a woman's voice came from behind the door. The door opened and Michelle appeared in a black dress with tear-stained eyes. "Detective Harris, what a terrible tragedy. Poor Jennifer. Yes, it's very sad. Can I come in? I need to ask you a few questions." "Of course, come in." The apartment was spotless. Too clean for someone who had just lost a friend. "When was the last time you saw Mrs. Cole?" Harris asked, taking out his notebook. "On Saturday, we went to the mall with Sarah." "And on Sunday?" "No, I was home. I wasn't feeling well." "I see. Did she call you on Sunday?" Michelle hesitated. "Call you?" "Yes, it's a simple question." "Yes," she called. She asked how I was feeling. "Did you discuss anything else?" "No, it was a short conversation." Harris nodded, continuing to write. "Michelle, I need to clarify something about your documents." "What documents?" "I contacted California. I checked the places of employment you listed. They don't exist." Michelle's face paled. "What do you mean?" "The Golden Dragon restaurant and the Fresh Market supermarket. There are no such establishments in San Jose." "Maybe I mixed up the names. It was a long time ago." "Maybe. Or maybe you were just lying." Michelle stood up. "Detective, I don't understand why you're asking these questions. Jennifer died in an accident." "How do you know it was an accident? I didn't say that." There was silence. Michelle realized she had made a mistake. "Well, that's what everyone thinks. That's what people in town say." "Marcus Lewis," Harris said quietly. Michelle froze. "What? That's your real name, isn't it?" The game was over. Michelle sank down onto the sofa, covering her face with her hands. "Yes," she whispered. "Tell me the truth." And Michelle told him. About prison, about pretending, about her fear of being exposed. But she didn't mention Jennifer's death. "Did Jennifer find out the truth?" Harris asked. "Yes." "And what happened then?" "Nothing. She said she would go to you in the morning." I left. "At what time?" "Around 9. "And you didn't see her again?" "No." Harris studied her face. "Did you or Marcus kill Jennifer Cole?" "No!" Michelle exclaimed, jumping up. "It was an accident! I didn't—" She fell silent, realizing she had given herself away again. "How can you know it was an accident if you didn't see her after 9 o'clock?" Michelle realized she was caught. Her story was falling apart. "I want a lawyer," she said quietly. "That's your right. But first, I have to arrest you." Harris took out his handcuffs. "Marcus Lewis, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Jennifer Cole." 2 hours later, Dr. Helen White arrived at the station. Harris contacted the prison in California and learned that she was the one who had worked with Marcus on his gender reassignment. "I remember him very well," Dr. White said, looking at Marcus through the mirror in the interrogation room. "He was very convincing. I really believed he was experiencing gender dysphoria. And now? Now I see that I was deceived. All of his behavior was carefully rehearsed." In the interrogation room, Marcus sat at a table in a prison jumpsuit, without his wig or makeup. His lawyer whispered something in his ear. Harris entered with a folder in his hands. "Marcus, we have witnesses who saw you leaving Cole's house around 9:30. We have your fingerprints in the living room, and we have a motive." "My client won't say anything," said the lawyer. "He doesn't have to. The evidence speaks for itself." Harris opened the folder. "Do you know what gave you away, Marcus? Cleanliness? When I came to your apartment, it was too clean, as if someone had carefully cleaned up the evidence." "That's not proof," said the lawyer. "True, but this is proof." Harris placed a photograph on the table. "Hair, long brown hair found near the body. DNA analysis shows it belongs to your client." Marcus turned pale. "And this," Harris laid out another photograph, "are microscopic fibers of fabric under the victim's fingernails. Jennifer was scratching herself, trying to defend herself. She fell," Marcus began, but the lawyer stopped him. "No, Marcus. You pushed her, after the struggle, after you realized she had discovered your secret." Marcus closed his eyes. "I didn't mean to kill her. She made me do it." "How did she make you do it?" "She said she was going to the police, that she was going to tell everyone the truth. I wouldn't have survived in a men's prison, do you understand? They would have killed me." "So you killed her?" "It was an accident. We had an argument. She tried to hit me. I pushed her away. I didn't know she would hit her head so hard." Harris nodded. "I see. So it was manslaughter." The lawyer quickly jotted something down in his notebook. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now you'll go to trial, and you'll probably go to prison for a long time." "A men's prison? Where else?" Marcus began to cry. 3 months later, the verdict was handed down. Marcus Lewis was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 15 years in prison. An additional 2 years were added for document fraud. Sarah Cole moved to her aunt's house in a neighboring state. Before leaving, she stopped by Detective Harris's office. "Thank you for believing me," she said. "Thank you for not giving up. Without you, he would have gotten away with it." "Do you think he really didn't mean to kill his mother?" Harris thought for a moment. "Maybe, but that doesn't excuse what he did. Your mother was a good person who tried to help. He took advantage of her kindness." Sarah nodded. "I'm going to miss her. She would have been proud of you." That same day, Marcus was handcuffed and shackled and put on a bus bound for a maximum security correctional facility. No one came to see him off. No one would visit him. He stared out the window at the passing landscape and thought about how things could have been different. If he hadn't pretended, if he hadn't lied, if he hadn't killed the only person who tried to help him. But it was too late for regrets. The bus turned the corner and Fountain disappeared from view forever.